Assalamu alaikum. Welcome again to Insight. I am your host. I am Rashid Rose. Tonight we are looking at a very crucial topic. The topic is addiction. In our society today, a lot of young folks and old folks even so suffer with different forms of addiction. It messed their lives up. It caused them harm. It caused them grief. Family lives are disrupted. And it's a mayhem to society and to the NHS, of course, and other health services. Addiction is quite wide in its content, and we need to find a way of dealing with this in society. And to discuss addiction with me tonight is psychotherapist, Brother Bilal Ali. Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Insight again, I should say.
Thank you.
Brother Bilal, from a psychotherapist point of view, and we're going to make tonight the program tonight more informative, interactive, instead of I'm interviewing you. When we look at addiction, what comes to your mind? I mean, what's the perception? You see doom and gloom, or you see hope and you see scope? I mean, how you see it from your perspective?
First, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me on it, to share your platform.
Anytime, Bilal. Anytime.
Thanks to the staff at Ali Bait for the hard work that I know that they put in behind the scenes to make things happen. So, alhamdulillah for that. How do I see addictions? I see hope, but I see addiction as something that's quite diverse, in the sense of it's something that impacts people from a variety of classes, from the social classes, people from a wide variety of ethnic backgrounds or racial backgrounds, and across genders. It doesn't, addiction doesn't discriminate, as we are led to believe in society, or as we know in society. There's so much discrimination. No, chemical addiction and non-chemical addiction is something that is wide-reaching. Up the social ladder and across the society at wide, in all different pockets. So it is quite a big topic. It is indeed a very important topic as well.
You mentioned two crucial elements there, chemical and non-chemical addiction. Could you briefly elaborate what's the difference for the viewers, please?
Okay, so what you have in a classical sense of addictions is alcohol and drug misuse, this type of chemical addiction where people, their excessive and compulsive behavior is related to taking a particular substance. But then you have a different type of addiction where the excessive and compulsive act is a behavioral trait. So that may be gambling, or that may be the watching of pornography, or things of that nature. So you have both chemical and non-chemical.
Is there, let's use the word, is which one impact more on the human, or both of them make an impact on humans? Are they both crucial in terms of the impact it could cause on one well-being?
Absolutely, but I think that chemical addictions are the ones, the drug and the alcohol seem to catch people's attention more, because when people are struggling, when you have individuals struggling with that, they're known for struggling financially, so they tend to, like people who are drug addicts tend to steal, whether it's shoplifting or stealing from their families. They often, not always, but oftentimes people really struggle with addictions. Are not well kept, they're very untidy. So there's outward signs. So that's what will lead us to kind of obviously, flag up those who are struggling with drug and alcohol problems. Whereas gamblers, there is also a problem. It impacts relationships. It destroys marriages, severs, blood ties. We know as in Islam, it's a very bad thing. But people just, sometimes the gambler, they can't tolerate in the family. Their behavior is too disruptive on their next of kin and their loved ones. So both kind of chemical and non-chemical have serious implications, something that we need to wrestle with, and we're always wrestling with as a society.
Bilal, crucial question I'm going to ask you, and it's quite stereotypical that certain communities are stigmatized more so than others for being drug addicts or victim of drugs, etc., etc. For example, it is well documented in America, the African Caribbean community is a victim of drug abuse. And in the Aborigines community in Australia, alcohol is endemic almost. Is there any specific reason why these two communities perceptionally are victim of drugs, or just on alcohol, or just something that has happened this way? What the point is it tailored especially hard drugs, to specific communities more than others?
Wow, you've gone deep. This is you're getting to the social political.
But this is
side
what
of
we're
things,
here for. Insight is to make people
you're going across the board. You're going across the
and we
board.
hope people call in and make contributions, because we need to get to the bottom of exactly what communities are affected, if so, and why, and what we can do to make these things, go away or treat people better. So yeah, is it targeted at more communities strategically than others, or just something that some communities gravitate to more than others? In your opinion, what do you think it is?
It's complex, but we can try and unravel it. I'm going to give my perspective, my research, my observations, inshallah.
Absolutely.
When you talk about, for example, the Aborigines of Australia, we have to take into consideration that they have been the victims of colonialism and racism, white supremacy. Not just racism as in discrimination, but you're talking structural racism, systematic racism. So this is talking about affects housing, people's, being able to keep their children in the past. Doing historical stuff about parental control and people's children being taken away by the state.
Yep.
So a type of genocide being carried out against, has been carried out against the Aborigine peoples of Australia. And one of the things that you find when you study the literature and the research on this thing what they call transgenerational trauma, when this, when people are, when populations are being decimated, substance misuse, particularly alcohol, for example, is a common way of people self-medicating to deal with the stress of being, you could say, systematically down-pressed and as I said, decimated socially. So they're known to have high drinking problems in their areas, but from what I understand, it kind of goes hand in hand with capitalism that, certain populations, you will see excessive things like betting shops. If we talk about Britain, for example, certain demographics where they are placed, there's an excessive betting shops and off licenses. So I think it's, this reason to believe similar with the Aboriginal peoples, that there is, the townships or the places that they live, there is enough alcohol for them to, let's say, destroy themselves, quote unquote.
So it's almost strategic.
I would say so, and you could look at another Aboriginal peoples, the Aborigines of America, or the Native Americans. Like many of their populations have suffered, similarly in terms of the structural decimation, and then the substance misuse. It kind of goes hand in hand. You mentioned the African American community, and documentation would suggest that government agencies, maybe 20, 30, 40, but whatever it was, it's on record that, hard drugs have been used to cull and to regulate, and to comatose or, put to sleep a population of people. So it gets deep. The rabbit hole goes deep, What do you want, the red pill or the blue pill?
Yes, because I know there were certain organizations in America working strategically to address this issue in, let's use the word, the ghettos in America.
Yeah.
And certain organizations doing the same thing for the Aborigines. But let's try to bring this home, let's say, to the UK.
Okay.
Is the impact, in your opinion, in whatever research you may have done, is the impact here in terms of drug and alcohol as endemic as it is in the USA, in the African Caribbean community, and generally across the wider community? Is it the same? And you mentioned before, capitalism is the forerunner to most evils and ills, because when people are deprived and depressed, they tend to turn to drugs and alcohol for comfort and solace.
Yeah.
So are we saying Britain is on the scale of America in terms of where drugs and alcohol is being used as a comforter in terms of stabilizing people?
I think according to, from research I've done in terms of looking into documentaries and reading literature and, just like listening to, as they say, the word on the wire, the word on the street, I don't think that the impact of, particularly hard drugs has been the same as the USA. I think that, America is a bigger country. It's almost like a number of countries. It's almost, you could almost equate the United States with, like, if you're looking at Europe, because,
it is massive.
It's a massive place. It's a different type of market because the marketplace is much bigger. So it's probably a different dynamic. But Britain has, as they say, America catches a cold and then Britain sneezes sometime after. So there's certain dynamics. Crack cocaine came out in a certain era in America, hit the streets, hit the ghettos, hit certain urban. Like this new term, urban. Hit certain urban areas, and then what do you see in Britain? A similar dynamic. Maybe not on such a grand scale, but it still had a disruptive impact. Same dynamics at play.
Bilal, I want to look at something here. We want to look at the effects of drug addiction on the family. From what I'm reading here, it says it destroys family life. Families get dismantled because people have to steal from the family to support the drug. So the impact socially is crucial. Now, how could one go about assessing or realizing someone in their family has got a problem? Is there certain changes that the person may go through in terms of the habits, or the person need to confess for us to know what's happening? Any way at all we can identify that a person is on drugs? Do they go through any physical changes? Because I've seen situations where people taking hard drugs, like for example crack, they become very thin and fragile and disorientated. Is this a common restructuring in terms of the physicality, or this is just a generalization?
No, that's an interesting question, because now you kind of put the light on or draw attention to the difference between substance usage and then addiction.
Right,
because I mean, as Muslims, in terms of legality of taking intoxicants, you know, the Quran says that it's the translation reads that it's a handiwork of the shaitan. So from an Islamic point of view, we kind of just tend to see, you know, like, you know, somebody using drugs, that's it's haram, it's a problem, and correctly so on one level. However, if you're looking at it on a wider society, so people that are not necessarily guided by, you know, the word of Allah in that sense, there are some people who are using particular substances, even if it's hard drugs like crack cocaine, you know, whether it's heroin or, you know, different types of products out there, or drinking in large amounts, but they are using it and they can be quite functional and quite productive people. It can be, you know, for example, it's known that, you know, people hate to stigmatize the city of London, but, you know, people that work in the financial district, you know, there are people that are under high stress, and to give them a little edge.
They said GPs to high consumers of alcohol to create stability.
Right.
So these are known facts.
Right.
And is this a norm? I mean, alcohol can create stability because the Quran quite clearly said we shouldn't be drinking. So when people indulge in alcohol, we can see the effects on society and the family. Like I said, the family life is wrecked. People end up stealing from their families. But how we as a group, how we as a people, how we as a community can start supporting, because we're not just to highlight problems on Insight, we want to find solutions as well. How could we start supporting? Because I'm not being naive to think that Muslims aren't affected by addictions as well.
Of course.
I know
in London, absolutely. It's an issue.
So we need to understand that Muslims are not exempt from addictions of sorts. So we need to highlight the fact that Muslims and those who are not yet Muslims are affected by addiction. That's why we're discussing it tonight, and how we as a community, I mean, your psychotherapy, I did some clinical counseling, so I work with people, drug and alcohol as well, but how we as professionals, how can we go about supporting those suffering actively and identifying them into how can we support them? What can we do? So
like I said, I'm going to bring it back to between the usage and then, if I can use the term, like abusage. So it may be difficult to whether a person's a Muslim or not a Muslim, if they're taking certain substances, whether alcohol or drugs, it may be difficult initially to observe that or see any telltale signs, because they might be quite functional. But what addictions is talking about is like the excessive use, a kind of compulsion, you know, this inability to ride the wave, to go without. And then over a period of time, then people's, you know, stereotypical signs, physiological changes, maybe loss of weight or bloating of weight, but, you know, like weight changes, physiological change.
Is that an obvious giveaway sign, the loss of weight?
No, people lose weight for stress, people lose weight for a number of reasons. So it's almost like when you're studying body language, people react in a certain way, but there may be other reasons. So you can't say he's lost weight or she's lost weight, she's on drugs, but you say it may be, in general, a cause for concern if somebody's had rapid weight loss in the family or a loved one. You know, as somebody caring about somebody, are they okay? Whatever it is. We're not saying it's drugs, it could just be a health problem, whatever it is, but, you know, so you're talking about physiological change in their demeanor, their personality, maybe shortness of temper, you know, like a bit more intolerant or quiet, withdrawn emotionally, just different, you know, different signs. Appetite changing, they eating a lot more, they eating a lot less, but just, you know, some sort of change in that sense. And then what can follow is when things start to go missing. missing,
You mean items in the house?
Irregular, let's say funds become, irregular. So
or
was
your
that £20
TV,
like that?
or your sofa, or your fridge even.
There you go. Or this, I need a loan and I'm coming back for a loan and I need, there's certain signs when if you know a person, they haven't been like that. It not necessarily means that's ultimately all it can mean, but these are like what we call red flags. And if you get a certain amount of red flags and you say, no, we need to either have a conversation, or I need to maybe bring this to the attention of another family member more senior, or, discuss it with them. Do you think so-and-so, our little brother, our older brother, our dad, do you think he's okay? Do you think she's okay? What's going on? Have you noticed? Oh, I've not yet, because I saw him say X, Y, Z, have a discussion to maybe, check out if it's just your imagination. Is it only you noticing things, or is there bits of the jigsaw that you also were unaware of, so you can kind of like maybe then come up with a plan to try and help them?
Bilal, we are in the religious fraternity, and we have a responsibility. As a senior health profession, we have a duty of care. Do you think that the religious fraternity, I would not just confine this to Muslims only, the churches as well? Do you think the churches and the Muslims, or the Christians and the Muslims, have a duty of care to the members of the local community? For example, I live in High Wycombe, you live in London. Do you think that the churches and the mosque or the local religious fraternity have a need to be setting up health centers to deal with the situations locally, or we need to depend entirely on the NHS for the support and guidance? I want to broaden this a bit, because we have a lot of responsibility in terms of shaping our communities, because we represent our communities wherever we live. But for reasons, and especially in the UK, we tend to depend entirely on the professionals from the NHS for our support. But in recent times, we talk about austerity measures.
Yeah,
where the NHS has been sliced up, cut up, chopped up.
That word austerity sounds too nice.
Well, it's only austerity for certain things, because militarily there's no austerity.
No.
For health reasons, there is austerity. For wages, there's austerity. But for military reasons, there's prosperity. So let's look at it from that perspective. Okay, so do we feel that the religious fraternity, the churches, and our mosques need to do more, our local community religious leaders need to do more in terms of supporting those people with addiction, or this is something entirely up to the NHS? What's your views? And I'm really trying to broaden it out as much as possible, because for too long, the NHS has been the vocal point in terms of contact. But like I said, it's stretched. They heard it during a doctor striking last week. So it is great. So we have to understand the NHS will not be what it's supposed to be for the next 20 or 30 years. And if alternatives aren't found quickly, those who are suffering with addictions, etc., will struggle. So the question is, in your opinion, do you feel that the churches...
No, the NHS are stretched. The NHS are stretched. The NHS are stretched. I have witnessed, a rise in waiting lists. I've received, I run a practice called Emotional Insight Consultancy,
absolutely.
An independent practice dealing with counselling and psychotherapy, and we've seen that referrals have risen.
And where's this practice
based in South London in Brixton, and we've seen a rise in referrals because the waiting list for not necessarily addictions, but just people who want, suffering from depression, different anxiety disorders, X, Y, and Z, want to be seen quickly, need to be seen quickly. But the NHS is it's bulging, is at the seams. So, yes, I think the religious fraternity, irrespective of denomination, would be wise to step into the breach, as God-fearing people, and do a social service. I know that in America, for example, historically, there have been organizations who, part of their street credibility, part of their reputation, part of their impact in the society was talking to those people who were, you could say, the despised and the rejected, the kind of, social misfits or quote-unquote failures, people who were on hard drugs. But there were organizations. We speak about El Hajj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X. We don't have to go too deep, but we know that for example, he in his organization, one of his early organizations that he had a leadership position, he would reach out, and they had a massive impact.
Yes, because I know some churches, I can't mention any one particular church because I don't want to be wrong, but I think some churches have established health clinics to deal specifically with health issues. But do you know, let's bring it local again, any Muslim center per se that has been set up specifically to deal with addiction and similar problems?
Not as in religious institution. There's religious. There's
shy away from.
I know there's Muslim. There are Muslim counseling services out there, and they deal with across the board issues. You know, as an agency. But
that's something I want to pick up in a little while.
But not religious centers. I'm not aware of that in terms of Muslims at least.
So are we missing a trick, Bilal, in your opinion?
Well, if we look in,
is it negligence? People just think it's not necessary, or is not for religious members to do? Is something that the NHS is supposed to be doing? I mean, should we be looking at our own, treating our own? Because after all, the community, we are part of the community. So we need to make some sort of initiative, in my opinion, to make sure that more health centers are established within the local community, and the mosque and the church are pivotal. In the community to deliver that service.
Very interesting question, because you know, one of the things they say is when you have an addiction, part of getting over that addiction is admitting that you have a problem.
Absolutely. That's the first stage of recovery.
Right, first stage of recovery. And what I'm thinking about when I think about Muslims generally is, I mean, obviously in the Christian community, or you know, maybe similar, maybe different dynamics at play. But just for let me just focus on the Muslims just for a minute. The Muslim community. I'm not sure how comfortable or Muslims at that stage across the board to acknowledge that problem, because as I said before, drug taking, substance misuse, gambling, you know, porn addiction, things of this nature are very taboo. They're forbidden. So I don't know if if you know, on a kind of like collective consciousness as a Muslim community, really, you know, taking that in a psyche to acknowledge, wow, this is really an issue with some young people in different pockets around the community that we need to address. Or because, you know, I've been to, for example, spoken on panels in, you know, Islamic centers in South London, for example, different places, but not too many on addictions, for example, you know. And again, it was one of the initiatives that took place, and it was really pioneering. I mean, the brother that organized it, God bless him, he really went out on a limb, because it wasn't the traditional religious, historical, time, you know, tried and tested subject matters. I think a lot of the community was like, well, what's that got to do with Islam? They didn't see the some people don't join the dots up. You see, they find it difficult. So, you know, there's work to be done, inshallah.
This is why we choose to discuss these things on Insight, because Insight is about bringing to the front subjects that people refuse or are afraid to discuss. Because, like I said, we can't be that naive to believe that addiction don't affect Muslims as well. And maybe our leaders are naive enough to think that it don't happen, so they don't need to set up centers. But coming back to the need of setting up centers, yes, I think it's down to the lack of professionalism in the local communities why these centers are in place, because these centers can be set up discreetly, I think.
We may need to be set up discreetly if it's...
And it's like I said, it's lack of professionalism, I think, on our part and faith, because we need to reach those who are lost. And you go to the Strand any one day, any one night, the amount of homeless people sleeping rough, and drugs and addiction can lead to that.
Yeah, so there's a role in that. There's a role in that, yeah.
And if we're talking about caring for humanity and caring for mankind, we need to start, you know, charity begins at home. And the religious fraternity in this country is massive. The church is a massive institution, and Muslims are in numbers. And I'd like to make a point here. I was at a conference some Mondays ago, and Brother Muxin mentioned a point, Muxin Abbas, and he said there was a lot that we Muslims can learn from the Jews. At a previous conference, this was mentioned, and somebody got up and said, well, no. And I'd like to make a differentiation here between Jews and Zionism. It's two separate things. And I mentioned the Jews in the context that the Jews have internalized the structure. They have their own hospitals in the community. You go to Brooklyn, even right here in Stamford Hill. They have their own schools, their own medical centers. Everything is internalized.
So they have their own social services.
Their own social structure. So you telling me that we as Muslims and Christians can't learn from such examples? These are good examples, because what they have done is to make sure that the needs of their community are met with internally, They're not dependent. I'm not saying they wouldn't use the NHS, of course, but issues of counseling and schooling and stuff like that is done internally. And I think we as Muslims and Christians can learn a lot from that example. I mean, I don't know how you feel about that, Bill. Is something you feel that we can benefit from that sort of example, or we need to shy away from the Jews entirely?
I think it comes back to the point you made when you said you was at the conference and the issue was raised about learning about providing social services for the community, meaning the Muslim community, but you were alluding to using the Jewish community as a model, and somebody started to talk about Zionism, and it maybe tells you where we are in, at least some of us are in our thinking, not to sound, lofty, but what I mean is that we're a little bit maybe not confident in terms of learning from different people. So we, sometimes we want to create this Dar al-Islam where we shut everything out that's not quoted in Arabic or something like that, and then we miss out on the marketplace of ideas. We need to be able to read and literature, review studies from different, put together by different organizations, and look at working models of different institutions in society. They don't necessarily have to be Muslim. If there's good in it, then we should be, we can be able to, maybe accommodate some of those practices or learn and set up our own, learn to set up things that would help us in our needs, but based off of models, external models. I don't have a problem with that.
You think Muslims are afraid to draw examples from the Jews? You think so?
Yeah, I think so. I think I can go back to a stereotype that there's a kind of sometimes people even use that word "the" as if it's definitive. Like the Jews did this in Islamic history, and the Jew. When you actually study the literature and what was recorded, you say, oh, there was a certain Jewish tribe, and this was what they did against the Muslims, and this was their fate. But another tribe didn't engage in that, or another clan didn't engage in that, and they had a totally different fate. So they were, Jewish clans and peoples with different attitudes. But sometimes we kind of, Muslims in the collective psyche, the Jew, like a kind of archetypal enemy. I don't know if.
Which is sad, because I feel they have a lot to offer, because I know they have their own hospitals and they have their own clinics, and they do really internalize everything. So people don't even know what's taking place in the community. That is how close they are. Muslims, I think, need to take that example, and Christians as well, because addiction is something that it can affect anyone. Like you said earlier on, Bilal, it don't affect one class of people.
You don't care about religion, race, class, age. It doesn't care about any. It doesn't take any of those things into consideration. It doesn't.
Which is quite sad. But in terms of our contributions, I mean, what can we do as professionals? What we need to be doing? We need to be liaising more with community leaders. I mean, are these things
it could be helpful. It could be helpful. I know there are initiatives going on at the moment. There are piloting schemes. There are initiatives. They're it's like the pioneers, really. People, they're organizations. You mentioned one of the brothers who are, trying to make the Islam in Britain more socio-politically relevant. To move beyond the rituals and the ceremony are the foundation and the bedrock. You can't change, Laylatul Qadr or Iftar or Muharram. You can change these things. They're part of what makes Islam Islam. However, there was more, I would say historically, there was more social aspect to Islam, and I think somewhat, we're kind of caught in a ritual and a bit nostalgic, but in terms of today's problems, today's crises, and what does Islam say on these things, and how can we, learn from different schools of thought that don't contradict Islam and embrace that and help ourselves. But, there's work to be done.
A lot of work.
There's work.
A lot of work to be done. You're watching Insight with Rashid Rose, and my guest tonight is Brother Bilal Ali, psychotherapist. We're looking at addiction and how we as community leaders and community members can support those with addiction. Brother Bilal, the other thing I want to mention as well is how we can care for our aging community in terms of those who are struggling to have their needs met. Again, come back to the issue. I want to move from the addiction for a little while and move on to a different topic here. How we as a people can support our elderly. Is there enough initiatives? Again, I want to localize it. The churches and the mosques. Is there enough being done to make sure our elderly, I use the term age with dignity? Is there enough being done in your opinion? I mean, how you see things in the community where you live.
I know there's some Muslim old people homes, Muslim old people homes that are in the community that are springing up. I'm not sure in terms of the numbers.
Did you say Muslim old people homes?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
I am aware. I am aware of. But however, I'm not sure how popular. But I know of a few.
This is in your neck of the woods, I suppose. Or you've seen it spread around.
A few parts of London. From speaking with some, Muslim, let's say, community organisers, people in leadership and stuff. I didn't know about them, but I was informed in conversation. Brought to my attention. There's one here, there's one there, but I'm not sure if they are open to Muslims or they're more ethnically. You need to be a member of a certain ethnic community or language group to benefit from that. See, so I know they exist, or there's a few that exist, but how open they are, I don't know. Maybe that's the next step, is to make them, more open to people to the wider community, and also the wider community contribute. But I can't in any way necessarily critique that section of the community, because maybe they were the ones that put the work in and bought the property and raised the funds and organised. So, naturally they may have a kind of inclination.
I've never heard about this initiative, which is quite brilliant, because one of the things I wanted to mention, apart from drug and alcohol, I got medical advice and care for the aging. That's something I work with personally with the aging community in High Wycombe, and we deliver a health and well-being project. And it's something I feel that the aging community is not being looked after well enough by the general community, by the government, so to speak. And again, I want to bring this back home to where the mosque and the church need to play a more pivotal role in making sure that the elderly is dealt with and treated with respect. And a lot more need to be done personally in terms of how we care for because at some point, Bilal, we're going to get older. And it's going to be down to our kids to look after us. By the end of the day, the community have a responsibility as well to make sure that the aging community is looked after properly. I want to move on to another aspect in terms of medical advice, and I want to shift back here to the whole issue of the addiction. And I really want to home in on the point where the churches and the mosques really need to be at the forefront of the community. And I don't want to separate the churches from the mosque, because we are not here to be separatists. We're here to be all-inclusive, and we work closely with the Christians, and we want them to work closely with us. So whatever projects we have, you want to share to the Christians as well. So in terms of medical advice, again, we go to our doctors, and we get advice, but is there enough, coming back to the same point, Bilal, is there enough awareness, like you mentioned a while ago, our local ulama, etc., are somehow lost in translation. Let's put it that way. They don't see things as relevant as we see it, because I don't think they connect enough with the masses to know what needs to be done. So they're very theoretical and theological in how they look at things. But basic issues like medical advice and setting up medical centers in the local mosque as a separate section, they don't see these things as relevant. So where do you feel the ulama need to play a role in reshaping, and our local priests in reshaping the community? We want to digress a bit from the whole drug and alcohol issue and broaden the discussion.
So you're talking about institutional or organizational development or
all
how
of
they
that,
operate.
all of that,
and
all of that.
One thing that came to mind when you were speaking is maybe we have to question, in philosophy, assume nothing and question everything. Is it the role of the cleric, from using that term generically, Christian, Muslim, is it the role of the cleric? Are they necessarily leaders? They are academics, they're intellectuals, they are teachers. But are they, necessarily, just assuming that they're leaders, that they have leadership skills, or, like in terms of social, economic, political vision and insight? That's a big assumption, because somebody's, studied to become a cleric. That's a lot to put on the cleric. So I'm saying maybe the community, as in the lay people or people that is involved in organization, maybe need to step up and help towards setting a tone or setting a direction, a trajectory. And it may be, the educational process could be a two-way thing. You know, we learn so much from the ulama in terms of classical scholarship, but also there's people there, professional people working big corporate organizations, managing, you know, big teams, massive budgets. I mean, can I assume because somebody went to clerical class that they would have a better understanding of how to manage a massive budget and, you know, execute goals, aims and objectives? I can't make that assumption. And I'm cast no negative aspersion on any cleric of any faith and any denomination, but I'm just questioning. I got to question that. I got to question that vision. Can we just assume that on them? Where did that collective consciousness come from? And is it correct? That's what we got to really get into.
What about the role of the masses in this process? Because the masses tend to believe our clerics and our priests knows best and are guided by them. At what point do we challenge our clerical leaders in terms of the perception of activities? How do we go about challenging the status quo? Because, like I said, in the church, the priests have the upper hand, and in Islam, the ulama have the upper hand. How we, as professionals, get the message to our leaders that they need to restructure the whole infrastructure of the community so that we can deliver drug and alcohol advice, medical advice, and care for the aging community. At what point do we engage, and how do we engage with our leaders in this respect?
I think we engage in dialogue, we engage respectfully, but we try to, establish forums, marketplace for ideas, and people put their pitches forward. I'm going to use a controversial term because I know this is a religious station, but only controversial in the sense of this term I've come across: social Darwinism. So not talking about social Darwinism, yeah.
When elaborate, Brother Bilal.
Yeah, from what I understand.
For our viewers, they may be lost as to what this really means.
My basic peruse, again, you know, with buzzwords, some words freak Muslims out because we hear a term, we say Nietzsche or Freud, or, you know, people lose, you know, they lose it a little bit. So I'm asking them to walk with me slowly, stay with me. We are Muslim. We believe in, you know, if I want to use the term creationism, we believe the Quran says, you know, Adam, Eve, Allah created, and you know, the way the Quran explains it, this is what we understand as Muslims. So I'm not talking about Darwinism. I'm using an analogy where they use as social Darwinism, what they use in social anthropology. And what the argument is that institutions, organizations, so not genetics and you know, human beings or, you know, or a living life form, but organizations which we create as human beings, whether they be tribe, clan, corporation, school or hospital or whatever it is the institution is, that they have certain ways of functioning, and every so often the socio-political economic landscape will change in certain locales, and those organizations which fail to adapt, hence the analogy for Darwinism, those organizations that fail to adapt, they become irrelevant and they cease, either they cease to exist, or they just fossilize. They, you know, outwardly they're still there physically, but if you go into the church, if they're not dealing with the ills of the society, if you go, and it's going to happen to the mosque if the mosque don't adapt, the Islamic institutions, if they don't adapt, there will be programs put on, and the turnout will be less and less, and the younger generation will attend less and less, or if they attend in body, but their mind is on their phone and the football results or whatever else is going on, because it's not speaking to the needs of the people, so they become irrelevant, and those organizations, they die out. It happened with the internet, you know, certain organizations, certain companies, for example, that didn't, you know, upgrade and go online and have an online catalog and an online selection. I mean, we know a guy that, you know, deals with books. Remember the gentleman that we know that sold, you know, conscious books.
Yes.
And he didn't move with the times, and now the man's got a house full of books worth like £50,000, but he can't move them because he didn't move with the online market. He fossilized. He didn't move. That's what I'm saying. He didn't move with the times. So that's the risk. So that's the kind of conversation in polite language and respectful language. That's the kind of dialogue that needs to happen between lay people, professionals, clerics, community organizers, people from all different strands of the society, you know? So
we are looking at if our clerical leaders, both in the Muslim and Christian community, fail to listen to the professionals, will become dinosaurs almost.
Yeah, there's always consequence, right? There's always consequence. This is reality. This is the law of Allah. In your opinion,
Bilal, has this already started to happen? Because we started off broadly. We use the word addiction, but I wanted to draw other aspects of society and community in terms of how we could support the whole addiction process. So you're looking at a situation where, because our leaders are failing to listen to us, our Muslim and Christian brothers who have an addiction problem would fall through the safety net because of lack of vision from our leaders. Is this what's going to happen sooner or later, you think?
That is looking down the, you know, the wheel of time sort of thing. It looks, it's unfortunate as it is, but that's in my perception, a reality that is has begun in terms of relevance. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, you see the church numbers declining.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
you see church numbers declining. I'm not sure if, you know, things work in concert. They work together. You know, cause and effect sometimes isn't just easy to unravel. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, so, the people are just ungodly. Mm-hmm. So that's why the churches are empty. Or did the people become more ungodly because the godly didn't bring them anything godly that seemed relevant to them? So they inevitably became more ungodly. So church numbers are dwindling. I think Muslims, Islam is a different religion or a different way of life or a different system. So whereas Christianity, you see the decline in numbers or the decline in its relevance because people don't go to church. I mean, there's some churches and pockets that are thriving and booming, but I'm saying, you know, the English church, the old English church, it's gone, man. It's gone. It's something of yesteryear. But with let me just finish this point. A really important point. But with Muslims, there's something different about the dynamic of Muslims. So Muslims will attend the mosque and pray and leave, or go to functions, and they're there in spirit. So it may be misleading. It may be misleading because, you know, when you look out there, you see faces, but they're not engaged. They're not moved.
But Bilal,
they're there.
You believe, I mean, we go to the mosque, you believe it need to be workers placed in the mosque or in the church congregation to identify people who, in your perception, may be suffering with drug addiction? Do you think that's something that needs to happen, coming back to the main topic?
Could be problematic because of, you know, the risk of stigmatization, you know, the offense somebody may take. So you lost weight, brother. It's, you know, I'm part of the...
No, the point I'm making is...
But if there's services available...
That's what I mean.
Yes, no, absolutely. I would agree with that. I would agree with that. I think
people can discreetly engage with the church without having to be discovered or disclosed.
It might just be a confidential helpline as a starting point.
Absolutely.
Confidential help. People like that word confidentiality. Like I said, I'm a counselor, I'm a psychotherapist, and it's one of the things when people come for help, nothing seems to really set the tone more than when you disclose to a person what you say is going to be held in the strictest of confidence, unless you suggest that you're going to hurt yourself, and then I'll have to tell, you know, disclose it to a third party. But, you know, when people know that they can open up in confidence, just think about the word, in confidence, it means it gives them confidence to come forward.
Because I know certain centers, religious centers, the mosque and others, do have marriage guidance counseling, and some do bereavement counseling, so their services already established. But to go a bit further, to establish drug and alcohol counseling, do must feel that's something that too taboo, they don't want to be stigmatized if they start delivering that sort of service in the churches too. That is more left for, let's say, it's not a religious thing to do, to seem to be counseling with drug and alcohol. Is that a correct perception, or that's a more dinosauric sort of perception?
I wouldn't say, I don't know. I don't think of it necessarily in terms of correct and incorrect as much as I think of it in terms of narrow, of myopic, a bit short-sighted. We have this phenomenon in the Muslim community. What's that got to do with Islam? So, you know, as I said, I'm going to go back, I'm going to beat that, you know, the nail on that hammer again. If there were not certain names mentioned or certain topics mentioned, time tried and tested topics, if you're speaking to people about something which to me Islam addresses, but you don't speak to them in a way where they can make the link, they will really not see that this is as Islamic as anything. You know, they you know, some people just don't get that. There'll be people watching now that says they're talking about addictions, but what's that got to do with Islam? Alcohol and things is haram. They give you a ruling, but they don't go beyond and have a philosophical perspective, an analytical perspective, engaging in the research literature and coming up with treatment plans. They give you a fatwa, they give you a ruling. It's haram. You know, I've been, as I sat on a panel before, and it was a very young shuyukh or young cleric, but he had a vision to, when he was speaking, one, you know, you don't really hear clergy speak about that, Muslim clergy necessarily speak about alcohol as such, but he started to make Islam real. When I was listening to him, I was inspired, young man, but he's talking about, you know, the Salatul Layl being the master key to increase you in your will, and the dua, and sitting on your prayer rug and facing, even if it's not prayer time, just sitting there and speaking with Allah, building that relationship, and, you know, crying to Allah, to, you know, with the will, because, you know, addictions are something of the will. So he engaged it on that level, you know, and
Nice.
we need some more. We need some more. We need some more.
Bilal, you run a practice, let's use the word practice. You have your own psychotherapy center set up. You want to tell folks where they can get in contact with you in case we're talking about advice? Where you set up, Bilal?
Yeah, I'm in South London. If anybody wants to drop me a line, they can send me an email on info@emotionalinsight.co.uk, or if you put that in a search engine, you can get my contact details. Yeah, Emotional Insight is on Facebook, on Twitter.
Okay.
But if you put the name in the search engine, or the email address in the search engine, you should be able to get my my website will come up.
And this is a private practice, so you charge for the services.
Yeah, no, it's an independent practice. It's an independent practice. So
Okay.
it's sliding scale, you know.
So how do you get clients, and what do? You advertise locally? How do you go about doing your stuff?
I'm on a few GP registers. I'm known in the community. Alhamdulillah, you know, even from abroad, you know, I get, you know, contact. So by the grace of Allah, you know, alhamdulillah.
But are you willing to go and speak again to some of these ulama in terms of what you can deliver, in terms of they maybe employing you in your capacity to deliver that service? That's something you're willing to do?
Yeah, no,
And
inshallah.
people like yourself probably
I was
take this
just about to
initiative.
say there is a cabal, a group, there's a group of Muslim psychotherapists, psychologists, counselors in the community that are doing some, you know, organizing and running programs, and, you know, have things in place that I've been, you know, I'm not privy to say too much at this moment in time, but they are in the community, and they are liaising, networking, and putting things together, you know. So some big things on the horizon. Big things on the horizon, inshallah.
Listen, we hope folks who are watching tonight were intrigued with the discussion we had. We talked about addiction in terms of what it entails, but not just addiction in a theoretical sense, is what community needs to do into supporting people with addiction. Like everything else, the program is going to come to an end. We want to thank you for watching Inside tonight with myself, Rashid Rose, and my host, Brother Bilal Ali. We hope you join us again next week, when I hope to have another guest discussing something as significant and important. And please, I'm here every Sunday. Please call to make your contributions. And until I meet with you again next week, I will say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And for those who are not yet Muslims, good night and have a good evening. Thank you very much for watching Inside.